Are fears around using spiritual practices and intuitive tools holding you back from your true potential? I'm Asha Wilkerson, an intuitive coach dedicated to helping you tap into your true potential through intuitive wisdom and ancestral connection. Today, we're going to tackle some common fears around spirituality and connection, especially those that are rooted around Christianity and religion. And I'm going to share with you some practical tools and steps that you can take to deepen your intuitive practice and ancestral connection. The goal here is for you to find a way to align your life with joy so that you can step into the life that you've always wanted to live and feel how you've always wanted to feel. Don't forget to check out my free 5-day joy activation challenge to help you connect to joy through your ancestors. It's linked in the description below. Now, many of us hesitate to embrace spiritual tools because of fear. And that could be fear from the unknown, fear of being judged by friends or family, or fear from religious teachings that we learned about in childhood. So many of us were taught that anything outside of the church, any tools outside of the church like tarot or astrology or even energy healing is considered witchcraft or of the devil. Have you heard that phrase before? But I'm here to tell you that all of these practices come from the same source, and that is energy. And you can find so many of these practices in pre-colonized cultures around the world, not just in Africa or in South America, but in all cultures from around the world. Now, for many of us Black and brown folks, this is kind of a tough conversation to have because our communities are so deeply religious, and religion is tied into morality and behavior, and Christianity in particular is very judgmental. But I'm going to ask you to stay with me for a few more minutes while I open your mind and help you draw parallels between energetic and spiritual practices and what you actually see going on in the church. Now, I didn't grow up as a church kid in the traditional sense. Like, my parents didn't make me go to church. But I always sought out religion and church as a kid. I used to walk myself around the corner to the church when I was in middle school and did a lot of volunteer work and ran children's ministry as a young adult in the church. And there was always something that kind of stood in the way of my connection with God or with the spirit. And I didn't realize it at the time, but after I started exploring these energetic and these spiritual practices, I was able to deepen my connection. And the reason why is that on an energetic and spiritual level, there aren't really rules to it. When I was in the church, it was the rule of showing up 3 times a week. It was the rule of don't cuss. It was the rule of don't drink. And if you're going to drink, certainly don't drink in front of the pastor. And all of these rules about how I could be as a woman and needed to wear pantyhose or don't wear pantyhose, but wear red or don't wear red. And lipstick. Are you being fasted? Can you have your shoulders out? All of these rules that try to control my behavior. And that was supposedly the way that I was going to get closer and closer to God and being more and more like God. But when I got rid of all of those rules and really started to understand what it was like to connect with this source energy from above, whether you call it spirit, God, the Holy Spirit, intuition, your guides, your ancestors, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. But once I got rid of the rules, the connection felt so much more pure and genuine and powerful because it allowed me to show up as I was with all of me without hiding the parts that I thought might have been shameful, and just to connect and to allow that energy to light up my heart and decide what steps I was going to take next. So let me tell you a little bit about how it works. But here's the thing, and I'm not trying to just bash religion in this episode or in this video, but I do want you to understand that religion has been used to control people's behavior for thousands of years. It was used in colonization to change the thought processes and the values of the people that it colonized around the world so that the people who were colonized would be easier to control by the colonizer. If you are able to tap into your own power and to have your own connection straight to the divine without all of these rules and regulations and leaders in your way, you become powerful. You begin to understand what is true for yourself without the interpretation of some educator or some priest or pastor standing in your way. And this is the reason why it's so important for us, particularly as Black and brown people, to get past the rules and the regulations of religion and understand how the spiritual and energetic connection works for ourselves, with ourselves, through ourselves, and by ourselves, because it will give us back the power that we have given up for so many centuries. This is why these fears about ancestral connection and energetic work were planted in us, because it was an effort to control our communities and to make us compliant with the colonizers. So there's no wonder why you have some fear or some hesitation that's resonating in your body right now, because you weren't meant to have this knowledge or this freedom. So how do you start to build confidence and trust in these energetic tools and practices, again, like tarot, like Reiki, like intuition, like ancestral connection, when you're coming from a place of fear? I'm going to encourage you to start small. Start by just journaling. Start by just writing down your thoughts free form without worrying about what they sound like. Set the intention to connect to your ancestors. Set the intention to connect to your intuition, and just ask, if my intuition were speaking to me, what would it say? And write down what it says. If my ancestors were to help me work through this problem, what would they tell me? And write down what occurs. And then just start to notice how that plays out in your life. And the more you trust yourself, the more you trust your intuition, it'll be easier and easier to keep trusting your intuition. But it's going to be hard for you to understand whether it's real, whether it works, whether it's genuine, before you take a small step of faith to test it. You got to put your toe in the water and see how it feels. And I promise you, it's going to feel a lot better than you ever even imagined. Another easy first step to take is meditation. Play some meditation music or just sit in silence for a few minutes and see what comes up. I also really like to pull oracle cards or tarot cards and just see. And I've always been interested in them, or I had always been interested in them before I started using them more regularly, but I wasn't quite sure. I never believed that they were bad, but I wasn't sure that I believed in them. And then I just decided to order a tarot deck one day and just to pull a card and see what came up. And I would ask before I pulled the card, whatever question was on my mind, whether it be, okay, what's the message that you have for me today? Or, should I take this trip back to the US? Whatever it was, and I would pull a card and then I would just see, how did that message resonate with me? And before long, actually immediately, all of the messages really resonated. It really felt like the cards were answering my question. And it was in line with what I was already feeling. So then I was able to develop the trust in the cards and in the tools because it didn't contradict what I was already feeling inside. So that is a great way to start to build trust and confidence in your practices and in your tools. Also, I just want to point out to you that our ancestors were already using spiritual tools and divination tools before colonization. They made altars, they said prayers, they interpreted dreams, they did energy work long before colonization. This is not new to us. This is a coming home for us. And ironically, or maybe not, colonizers told us that these practices were evil, and then they adopted them and put different versions of them in the church. Let me tell you, one of my favorites is how the church tells you that praying to multiple gods is a sin, that that's wrong, that you shouldn't have more than one master. Yet there are so many saints in the Catholic Church that also have their own prayers that you have to learn how to recite if you go to a Catholic school. Hello, Catholic high school over here. I don't really understand how praying to different saints, people that walk the earth at one time, is different than honoring multiple gods or even honoring your ancestors. The saints are ancestors. They're just not ancestors from your bloodline, but that's okay in the church, but not okay for us to do in our own practice, I don't know. Something doesn't sit right with me about that. There's also some funny business about altars and incense and candle rituals. But do you know that the church uses all three of those? Churches have altars, particularly Catholic Church. They use incense. I remember the first time that I burned the frankincense resin, and it took me all the way back to my childhood when we would burn frankincense. I didn't know what it was, but I recognized the smell in my Episcopalian school and in my Catholic high school. I distinctly remember this, I don't even know what the thing was, the incense thing, and whoever was walking by, and they would scent the chapel with the frankincense. And I had no idea that it was the same thing until I smelled it years later when I was learning about my own spiritual tools and indigenous practices. The church also uses candles. So what's the difference between you lighting a candle and saying a prayer in your house, or doing a candle ritual so that you can call in a blessing or more money or something else? How is that different than lighting a prayer candle in the Catholic Church that you often have to pay 50 cents to $5 to light in the church? How is that any different? You're lighting a candle, you're saying a prayer. One, you're just doing in the privacy of your own home, and the other, you're doing in the public venue of the church. Same? Same. The church also rejected divination or intuition and guidance that is received outside of the church. So how is a prophet who saw things in the Bible any different than someone who's clairvoyant or an energy reader? If they can both read the energy of the time, why is one okay in the Bible, but one's not okay in present day? Also, the Bible frequently used dream interpretations and prophetic visions, and they casted lots. Going back to the ancestral veneration, it became taboo in the church. We were disconnected from honoring our ancestors, yet we talk about St. Peter and Mother Mary and St. Paul, and those were people who had walked the earth, who were no longer alive, that the church holds up and honors on a regular basis. They are ancestors, they're just not your ancestors. So I just want you to know that these practices done outside of the church are not evil. They've just been renamed. They are actually sacred. And I think it's a testament to how sacred and how powerful they are that they were considered taboo outside of the church, but important enough for the church to bring them in as a part of its practice. When I got into Reiki and to energy healing at first, because like you, I grew up with the conditioning that some of these things are taboo and they're bad. But when I first got into it and really started to see how powerful it was, and when I made the connection that at the altar, especially in Black churches, after the sermon, you go up and you receive prayer, and sometimes people will lay their hands on you. When I realized that Reiki is a similar thing, but sometimes with a different intention or a different intro into it, it really opened up the door for me. That meant that I didn't need to receive energy healing just in the church. And if I could see it in the church and I enjoyed it in the church, I could also do that for myself with whatever healer that I wanted to engage with the person that made me comfortable, not just with the people who were at the altar that day at church. So being able to engage in some of these spiritual practices without the structure, without the rules, without the behavior that says that I need to be this kind of way in order to engage in this, it has really opened up and transformed my life. I no longer carry around the same guilt. I no longer carry around the same shame. I don't think about, oh, I have to be clean and pure before I'm able to engage in these practices. Not that I'm doing anything crazy, but there's so much proving that you have to do oftentimes in the church to be worthy of receiving or worthy of leading. And that's just not true outside of the church. You can come exactly as you are. You are the conduit for your own healing. You don't need someone else to do it for you. Once you learn how to turn it on, you become your source, connected to source, and that is so powerful. So I'm really curious, what is one practice, spiritual practice, that you've been curious to try, but you haven't tried yet because you're a little bit afraid of it? Please tell me in the comments below so we can talk about it. Now, before you engage in any of these spiritual tools, whether it's inside or outside of the church, it's really important to set your intentions. Where your intention goes, energy will flow. And with your intention and attention, you can get some really powerful changes. I always encourage you and encourage my clients to set a loving intention. Allow your heart to open up. And when you feel peace and safety and comfort, then I want you to engage in whatever the practice is, whether it's pulling a card, doing a meditation, using a pendulum to get a yes or a no answer, whatever it is, do it with clear and good intentions, and you will love what comes back for you. And also, as you do it, don't worry about the spiritual trends. Don't worry about following people on Instagram who are going to show you how to do a cacao ceremony or a tea ceremony. Do what feels right for you. Ask yourself why you're intending to connect and what answers you're looking to get. You will receive them as soon as you take off all the pressure of showing up in a particular way. Now, you may not have heard this in church, but God or spirit or source really honors clarity and conscious connection. There is no requirement for perfection, so please do not feel like you have to come in this perfect form or that you can't have any issues going on. Just be clear about your intentions and be conscious about trying to connect, and you will succeed. It's also really important to find a community of like-minded people. Now, I've said it before in previous videos, not everyone's going to understand your journey, and because of that, not everyone's going to be able to help you. But take your time to find a community that really works for you. Vet the people that you're working with, ask them about their training and how they learned, and then engage bit by bit and see how you feel. And if you don't feel comfortable, jump out of that community and find something else that resonates with you. There is power in community. One, because they can mirror back to you and echo back to you what you're feeling, but also because you can ask questions and get support along the way. You are not the only one who is looking to strengthen your connection with your intuition and your ancestors. So find a group that supports you and helps you to feel good as you're doing it. Now, I come from a background where I have a mom who was a career educator. My dad was his own business owner, and I was an attorney and worked as a community college professor before I took the leap and moved to Portugal, and now I'm opening up a healing business. But when I first started on this journey, I was a little bit afraid to tell people about it because I didn't know a whole lot of people in my community who were also on the same journey. And when I got to Portugal, I was like, okay, Asha, you got to start telling people what you're doing. And I would hesitate and I would kind of whisper it out there. But every time I said, I do Reiki, I do breath work, I lead meditations, I'm a healer, people go, oh, I'm looking for someone like you. Oh, I do Reiki too. I love breath work. Tell me how you do it. And I was just so surprised at how aligned the people were that I was meeting. But the only way I was able to find that out is because I started to open my mouth and to share what I was going through. So make sure you tell people when you feel safe what it is that you were exploring, and I guarantee that the people who were going down the same path as you will rise up and will meet you exactly where you are. So if you're ready to dive deeper in your spiritual journey and you want to connect to your ancestors and activate joy, download my free 5-day joy activation challenge. It's linked in the comments below, and it will certainly transform your life and how you see yourself as it relates to your ancestors and how you relate to joy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video so you can stay connected to the community. And I cannot wait to chat with you in the comments about your spiritual adventures and how you're testing out your tools of divination and spiritual practices. See you next time.